Welcome back to Palm Tree Life. I'm Tim, and we are going to do a succession overview. Maybe it's a guide, but I really just want to take some time to explain a lot of the different possibilities in succession. This was requested on the channel, and obviously if I have people that want to learn, I obviously want to teach. So let's get into this overview. I will break down and put the chapter titles in, so if you want to know something specific, obviously jump to it right away. You don't need to listen to everything. Get to the thing you want to learn about and start learning. First things first, let's deal with our heir. So our player character is the heir of whatever title that we have. So in this case, the Abbasid Empire. But it really is just whatever titles you have. It could be as small as one county, and it could be as big as an empire. But whatever you have, that is your heir. When you click on your character, it will show you right here if there is a player heir. If there is no player heir, it will say no player heir here. So make sure that you're paying attention to make sure that you have a player heir, because if you don't, when you die, the game is over. Another place that is good to check on succession and paying attention to who might you be playing as, or who could be potential threats within the succession. You can click on any title you have. So here, the Abbasid Empire, we can see that we are the current holder, and this is why he is our player heir. He's the next in the line of succession here. And then we have our nephew, and then we have our half-brother. So you can see here, it gives you the succession. It also lets you know who has a claim on that title. So it will let you know who you might be able to be, who you might need to be paying attention to, who you might need to sway, who you might need to just take out before they become a problem. And if you want to know the title history of who all has had a title, it's all in here too. You can click on that and pay attention and just see the history of a title that you may have just taken from someone else. In explaining some of the terms, here you can see Duke Necklin of Bohemia. If he should die, his player heir will be Count Hostavit of Plen. He gets the primary title right here, primary title of the Duchy of Bohemia. So he is the player heir. He is also the primary heir. The junior heir is Spitamer right here, because he does not get the primary title. He's still going to get some titles. He's still going to get the same amount of titles, but he will not get the primary title because he is not the primary heir. That is the explanation on heir, player heir, primary heir, and junior heir. When looking for eligibility of succession, so who is even eligible to succeed as the ruler, you need to click on that title, and you will see if there's any specific line of succession laws. And we have one here. So you have the title of succession will be inherited according to the Kingdom of West Francia as male only, so there's no females that can own this title at this point. Confederate partition law, which means that everybody will inherit equally, all of his children. And so you can add laws if you want to try to add in a specific law for that title, and if you have the ability to do so, you can add it in for prestige. You can also remove a law if you want to take it out and it's no longer the realm succession law. You can also destroy the title. Sometimes that can help within succession to make sure certain people get certain titles, but that is the eligibility line, and you have to pay attention to the succession laws to make sure that someone you're trying to get that title can actually get it because they are eligible to get it. Also within eligibility, something you want to pay attention to are certain traits. So the bastard trait keeps people, so right here, may not inherit titles. So there's specific culture and laws and different things where if they are a child out of wedlock, if they are through adultery or something like that, depending on the faith, you have to pay attention to the faith, you have to pay attention to the culture. There's tons of different variances of this, but if they have this trait, they may not be able to inherit titles. Others might be able to inherit it anyway, And if you are another ruler, sometimes if you have a child out of wedlock, you can still make them an eligible heir if you include them and let everyone know that is my child and welcome them into that family. You can pay a high price to do that. Your family may not like you because of that. You may be marked as an adulterer, and you may be thrown in prison depending on your level within the kingdom. And so you need to remember that if you're going to do all of that, but pay attention to those. So if you may be wondering, like, why can't I get this person eligible? And maybe because they have a specific trait like bastard. They may have a trait like a child of a concubine, so it's not your primary wife. It may be a secondary wife. Another trait that can keep someone from inheriting is being a monk or a nun. So they may not inherit titles, they may not marry. So if you have, so in this case, we have the Catholic faith. If you have two sons and maybe you don't want the older one to get the titles because he's just not as good as the younger one, you might be able to make the older one a monk, and he will pursue a monk's lifestyle, and he will not inherit any of your titles. This is an easy way to make sure that all of your titles go to one son if you're in a male-only succession law. So you can look for this title. You can also give it. It is kind of a little quirky thing that allows you to keep passing titles down if you want to use it that way. Another part of the succession law is if you have someone that is going to succeed you and you really don't like that they're going to be your primary heir, or that's going to be your next player heir, you can disinherit them or denounce them. So this denouncing takes them out of pretty much takes them out of the dynasty. Like anybody can imprison them, get rid of them. Disinherit just removes them from the line of succession right there. Now you can do it, and you can see it's going to cost 900 prestige, 225 of our dynasty renown to do that. But if somebody's bad enough and you really don't want them to succeed you, you can disinherit them and move on to somebody else. Also another way that you can exploit multiple sons in a male succession law. You can make sure that only one just gets them all because everybody else has been disinherited. Another situation that can come up is if you have the child of a concubine. So here you've got Chieftain of Kano is married to Magagia of Dara, right? That's his primary wife. He has a concubine. They have a child. It is a child of a concubine. Now he gets claims because in their faith culture, the child of a concubine can still have claims in succession. And so it's viewed as like a second wife more than adultery. So there's still claims there. And this is an interesting dynamic specific to this family in this game. As you can see, he has an older child right here. All right. He has claims to 5 titles here. His dad has 5 titles, but the mom also has 2 titles, Dara and Katsina. And if you look at Dara, her son, her specific son, so not the oldest of her husband, but her oldest son, it is able to be the primary successor of the chiefdom of Dara because this specific title has equal representation in Confederate partition. And so even if this was a daughter, she would get the title over the oldest of the father because it no longer matters because of the succession law to that specific title. All right, let's go to our single realm heirs. So right here. Okay, let's explain these real quick. So to get to this, you just pull up your realm, you go to succession, then you hit change to change successive laws. You can also do change gender laws. Now you may have to do things within your faith, within your culture to allow these things to change, okay? So right now I can't change any of those because of my faith and culture. And you may have to do innovations to get to that point, all right? Almost everyone starts on Confederate partition with multiple realm heirs. But if you want to go to single, you eventually have to innovate. But the primogeniture is where all titles are inherited by the oldest eligible child. So this is the one where most people want to get to it as fast as they can in the game so that all of their titles, they don't have to worry about succession wars and who's getting what and how this all plays out. They're just giving everything to one person, and it's the oldest child. That's primogeniture. Ultimogeniture is the same idea. All the titles go to the youngest. So instead of the oldest, it's the youngest. So still all the titles move with one child. It's just the youngest rather than the oldest. This can be helpful, like if your current heir plays, or like your character lives a really long time, sometimes it's better to hand them all off to the youngest so they're more in their 20s or early 30s rather than their 40s and 50s. And by the time the short reign penalty ends, they're dying too, and you're in this constant cycle of a short reign penalty. So sometimes that can be helpful too, and you can just work for your youngest to be your best. House seniority is actually a pretty interesting succession law. I actually did a playthrough with it if you want to check it out. I was Bohemia, so you can find that on the channel. That's the playthrough. And with Bohemia, it's part of your innovation very, very early in the game. And so you can actually hand off all of your titles to the oldest dynasty member of your house. Okay, so if somebody goes off into another house, it doesn't matter. But if they stay in your house, it can you can hand off all of it to whoever the oldest is. The difficulty is that you hand it off to a lot of 50, 60, 70-year-olds, and their short reign penalty is always there. But the benefit is you don't have your titles getting split off to a whole bunch of different people. It constantly stays in your house, and they all go to one person who is your player heir. Confederate partition is where most people in the game start, and what it is all of your titles get equally distributed among all of your children. All right, so everybody gets 4 or everybody gets 3. It just depends on how many titles you own. Everybody's going to get some of them, and the oldest child gets the best title. So whichever one is your primary title. So if you have a primary title that is let's say the Kingdom of Bohemia, and then you have another title that is the Kingdom of Moravia, the second child would get the Kingdom of Moravia because your primary title is the Kingdom of Bohemia. So you have to pay attention to that. And if you want to give your child specific, like if you would rather, you want to know that they're going to get Kozlov instead of Prague, you may have to go in and change your capital, move realm capital here. When you do that, you know without a doubt they're getting this title because it is your primary capital title. Also within Confederate partition, if you become an empire and you're over 3 kingdoms and you have 3 children, your oldest will become the emperor. They will have your primary title's kingdom, and then the other 2 children will become kings as well because they will get the other 2 kingdom titles. This is where you've got to be careful, because if you have 3 kingdoms that you actually own those domain titles of 3 kingdoms, but you are not an emperor yet and you die, all 3 of your children become kings, and then your kingdom gets split 3 ways because you weren't an emperor yet, so there wasn't a primary title above those other titles, and so everyone got an equal title. So it is something to be careful in your succession. One other thing with Confederate partition is if you have not created titles, upon your death, those titles will be created to be handed out. So let's say you have 3 duchies, but you don't want to own 3 duchies because you'll take the 3 duchy penalty as an heir of titles. So you haven't created those duchies. Upon your death, those 3 duchies will be created. So if you're thinking you're going to game it by not creating a duchy title and so a child won't get it, they will, and it will show up here that it's going to be created. It'll actually tell you that they're going to receive that title when you die. So you don't have to create it in your lifetime so that you can keep it from getting the 3 duchy penalty, but on your death it will be created and it still will be there. Within regular partition, it will all the titles will go down through your children, and so it'll make sure that it is equal on each level. So if you have one empire title, that will go to your oldest, but if you have multiple kingdom titles, they will make sure that each child gets equal amount of kingdom titles. So if you have 8 and you have 4 children, they are all going to get 2, where your primary title and that primary kingdom and de jure that goes with it will stay with your oldest child. And then it goes down to duchies. So if you have 12 duchies, and you have 4 children, they're going to each get 3, and they'll do their best to keep them within the de jure titles, but if they need to go outside and give them other titles, they will. And the same with counties and baronies. And finally, we have high partition. High partition is your oldest child, your oldest eligible child, receives the first half of the titles. All right, so in each step, empires, kingdoms, duchies, counties, half on each one of those levels is automatically given to the oldest eligible child. After that, the rest get divided by the junior heirs, just like normal. But if there's an odd amount, so if let's say there's 4 children and there's 17 counties, that extra county, so they all get 4, but that extra county will go to your oldest eligible child. So all the leftovers, if there's any leftovers when it's all divided, it automatically goes to the oldest eligible. To explain how male-only primogeniture is succeeded, all right, I wanted to explain this. You can find this on the CK3 wiki, but you can see the yellow 0 box there. That is you, that is the heir. When you die, if you have 2 sons, it goes to the oldest, then to the youngest. Then you see it can go to your brother, then it would go to your dad if he's still alive, and then it would go to a cousin, all right, and then it would go to a more distant cousin, all right, and the yellow boxes would be women. They could, according to male-only primogeniture, they can't succeed, and they are not eligible for any of this, so they miss out. In male preference ultimogeniture, so this would be the youngest gets all the titles, right? Single heir. You see there the 0 box is us, the 1 box is our youngest, so then it would go to our oldest, and then it would follow a similar pattern as it did before, but you can see in the yellow circles now, because it's only male preference, all right, instead of male only, it can go to women in a preference level. So we would have a distant cousin that's younger than us that would be the 6th in line, and we would have an aunt that is the 8th in line. Here you have equal house seniority, so this would be the house seniority that I talked about. If you are the player, this is where it gets interesting, is that you can have as many children as you want, because it doesn't really matter. They're not going to succeed unless they're the only ones that are alive, and then it would go to the oldest one that is alive. So in equal house seniority, it would go to your dad, assuming that your dad's still alive. Then it would go to your aunt, assuming she was alive, unless you did have a cousin that was older than your aunt. It just depends. Equal house seniority is going to go to the oldest person in your house. That's how it works. And then finally, we have the female preference partition. Okay, so let's explain this one. So here you see it doesn't go directly to a female because it's female preference. If it was female only, it would go to our aunt, and then it would go to our distant cousin. But because it's female preference, it still goes to our sons, even though we have 2 sons, and it still will follow through our specific line. And because there's no females, it just keeps following the males until it gets to our aunt, and then she would be the first actual female, but she would get preference over our cousins at that point. So there are different parts of the world that will have different electives within the title succession. All right, so if you want to add this, the Scandinavian elective does cost prestige if you want to add it in, but what happens is the ruler and all de jure vassals, except for the barons, all right, can nominate a title heir amongst the ruler's extended family. So when you look at that person, that ruler's house, they can vote on someone from the extended family as any available claimants, and then they vote. Now the voting power is dependent on the elector's total domain development. So this is where development is really important. If you are voting and you have high development, your vote counts as more. If you are you can have more titles, but it's not about titles, it's about development. So they may have less titles but more developed counties and provinces, and so they get a bit more votes and they can outvote you for who they want to succeed. So that's something to remember. And it also is about the capital popular opinion. So do they like you or not? So it is in a Scandinavian elective succession law, it's important to be liked and it's important to have high development. And if you are a known criminal, you cannot be part of the voting. You are automatically ineligible. Your children can be voted on, but you can't if you're a criminal. If you end up playing in the British Isles, and specifically Scotland, you will see the Tanistry elective succession law. This is where vassals who are 1 or 2 ranks below the title can nominate an heir from the members of the ruler's dynasty. So it's about the dynasty, not the house. So the entire dynasty can be voted on. Vassals will tend to favor older, distant relatives over close family. So it's a higher probability that you will have a relative that as your player heir that will take over that title than your child. So it is something to remember. And you can see here your player heir and son right now, that is who is being voted on to elect. And you can see here they have the ability to cast votes, all right, to vote for who they want as that next heir. To be clear, when I explained the Scandinavian elective, you got votes depending on your domain development and your capital popular opinion. In the Tanistry elective, all you need is a rank. If you are a vassal, that is 1 or 2 ranks below. So if they are a king and you are a duke or a baron, you get to vote. Check that. If you are a king and they are a duke or a count, you get to vote. When I explained Scandinavian elective, it was important to remember that your votes depended on your domain development and capital popular opinion. But in the Tanistry elective, all it takes is a title. So if you are a vassal of the king, so if there's a king and you are 1 or 2 ranks below that king, you get to vote for the heir. There is a princely elective if you happen to form the Holy Roman Empire, and if you do, there's the emperor and then the 7 prince electors that can nominate an heir from amongst themselves. So if you've ever played U4, you've seen this play out in the Holy Roman Empire mechanic there. Any legitimate children and siblings of the ruler, as well as any other major de jure vassal of the empire, is eligible. If an historical elector title is held by infidels, it doesn't exist. So if it's no longer Catholic, if the Abbasids or somebody gets up into one of those titles, it's immediately they don't get to vote. So there's no gaming that mechanic there. And then another de jure vassal will just take its place. So it'll add in someone else to be the 7 prince electors. This succession law plays a significant importance on faith and piety. So if you're one of the Holy Roman Empire voters, it's going to heavily depend on your faith and piety, like where you are in your rank and how much piety you have is going to be how much weight your vote has. In the Saxon elective, the ruler and all direct de jure vassals of 1 or 2 ranks below the title. So if you, right here, we have the Kingdom of East Francia. If we put the Saxon elective, every vassal that is a de jure vassal of the Kingdom of East Francia can nominate an heir from among powerful vassals. So it no longer has to be your dynasty or your house. It can just be powerful vassals and the ruler's legitimate children. Okay, so powerful vassals and then your kids and any other valid claimant. So if they have a high rank, probably, or if they're, right on the verge of powerful vassal, maybe they're in and they're not in. Sometimes those goes back and forth. That's the Saxon elective, where it literally, it may not matter how many children you have, you may not be able to keep the throne going to the next generation if they vote for someone else. And then finally, we have the feudal elective, where the ruler and all the direct de jure vassals, so here specifically of the Kingdom of East Francia, of 1 or 2 ranks below that title, can nominate an heir from amongst themselves. So they can pick anybody that is one of themselves or one of the close family of the ruler. So your kids, your brother, your dad, if there's a reason, your mom, if the gender law is equal or even moves to female preference. So that's feudal elective, where once again it could completely leave your family dynasty house and go to someone else. So as I leave you, I want to leave you with just a couple reminders, things to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on, do I have a player error or is there no player error? That's critical, because if you have no player error and die, game over. Another place to quickly look at your line of succession to see this, whatever your primary title is, who is it going to, is right here. And if you want to know everybody that has the ability to attack you or try to claim that title, it's right here in the claimants. That is key to remember. You can add laws to try to benefit who you're giving it to. And then finally, don't forget, you go here for succession. You can see where every single one of your titles is going. You could have 17 children, you could have 10 sons, and it'll show you every single title and which son it's going to and how all that is going. You can change or look at the possibility of succession laws, gender, like do I have the ability to switch any of this? And don't forget, as you're doing your innovations, don't forget to look and see, are there any possibilities of going quicker on any of changing those laws if I innovate something faster, assuming that you're a cultural head. So pay attention to all of those. You should be good to continue to keep playing all the way to the end of the game and beyond if you would like to. But I hope this is helping you figure out how to hand off your titles as a player heir, to keep passing it down, to have some fun in different cultures and try different types of electives and succession laws. It's a lot of fun to try those different things and see. You might find one that you really enjoy, that just kind of sticks out to you, that's a lot of fun. That's how I found Bohemia. That's why I did the Bohemia playthrough. If you want to see that house seniority succession law, please check it out. I think you'll have a lot of fun seeing me get really frustrated at times. But anyway, thank you so much for checking me out. Hope this was helpful to you, and I'll see you next time.